All right. So our next presentation is the beginning of greatness, the development of high-performance women's ice hockey in Canada Games. And Kat Rice is going to deliver that. She is a fourth-year student at Brock University, co-majoring in Canadian Studies and History while pursuing a minor in political science. Her other hockey research includes publication pairing Hockey Canada's program and excellence in USA's hockey national team development program, preserving the history and the legacy of the Garden City area oral history. She is hoping to pursue a hockey oral history for her master's, and she is a former LaSalle Sabercat in the Sun Power Female Hockey Association. Welcome to
Faith, you're okay?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kat. I just wanted to start off by acknowledging Dr. Stevens and all her knowledge and research on women's hockey. Not only do I admire her personally, but I relied a lot on her work throughout this project. This is my major directed research for my fourth year, which I started back in the fall. And when I started this project, I started by finding and reading everything I possibly could that Dr. Stevens had wrote. So thank you. A couple of weeks ago in March, I was working on a different oral history project, preserving the history and legacy of the Garden City Arena here in St. Catharines. And one of the contributors I interviewed said, "Why would you want to talk to me?"
Oh, and there should be arrows at the bottom. Oh, I've done this every single time. Sorry. I have to get it set up on Zoom and then back to PowerPoint. Now should be live. Yeah.
Why would you want to talk to me? I'm a nobody, right? His interview lasted an hour only because that was all the time he had available, but it was clear he still had experiences to share despite him thinking he was a nobody. I start here because I believe this quote from this contributor illustrates the importance of oral history. The cliche for oral history is that it gives voice to the voiceless, but in a lot of cases that's true. Sociologist Anne Carp, for example, sees oral history as being particularly suited to record the lived experiences of minorities, those who are often denied the opportunity to share their stories in other mediums. This is the case for female hockey players who often lack the platform to truly share their experiences. History is comprised of facts that is then spun into a narrative. The problem with this is that we have to ask, who is controlling that narrative? Whoever controls the narrative controls what is said, but also what and who is excluded. Historian Donald A. Ritchie explained that oral history makes the historical narrative more complex by adding an ever wider range of voices to the story. It is for this reason that oral history is so important to women's hockey. Hockey is Canada's game. Canadians claim that hockey, an international sport, is their own. In the eyes of Canadians, hockey is part of the everyday experience and a defining part of the Canadian collective memory. But this narrative has been criticized as tying masculinity to Canadian national identity as it focuses on men's hockey rather than the sport itself. Despite this, hockey is not and has never been an exclusively male sport. With the emphasis on men's hockey, oral history captures the women's hockey stories and experiences that would otherwise have been forgotten. It captures the stories from the people who experienced it in their own works. Oral history provides a way to ask questions that have not been asked, collect the stories that would have been lost, and preserve their experiences so they can be shared and learned from. Women's hockey scholarship, while a field that has taken off in the last 2 decades, is nowhere near the standard of men's hockey. Before I started working on this project, I had never heard of the Canada Games. Ahead of the Canada Games coming to Niagara for 2022, most of the people I'd spoken to hadn't either. So if no one's asking the questions or writing the stories, what happens to them? They risk being lost to time. So oral history is an answer to preserving and capturing the stories. Another way of preserving stories is photography. Sport is a visual experience. And sport and culture historian Mike Hudgens noted, encountered largely through visual media, visual representation, whether television, still photography, or increasingly visual media. It is then important to consider these visual representations as their own source when it comes to analyzing and understanding sport. When I began my research on women's hockey at the Canada Games, I found very little. Despite being around almost as long as the Women's World Hockey Championship and a critical aspect to the development of women's hockey in Canada, there was no clear investigation into women's hockey at the Canada Games or a clear narrative of experience. Outside of the oral history interviews conducted by the Sport Oral History Archive, the Canada Games were only mentioned in interviews when players were directly asked about them, which was not very often. This meant I had to rely heavily on the oral history interviews conducted by the Sport Oral History Archive, particularly those of Dr. Stevens and multi-time Olympian Carl McLeod. And I also relied heavily on what was revealed in the several hundred photographs I personally digitized and preserved. Dr. Alexander Freud and Dr. Alistair Thompson explained, images need stories to create meaning. In order to imbue images with meaning, we tell stories about them, whether silently to ourselves as we view a picture and speculate what happened before the depiction of the scene, or out loud to others. The photographs I worked with were part of the Canada Games Council's photograph collection, which were put into boxes and largely forgotten about. Up until now, with the Digitization Preservation Initiative, they were left in a closet and probably only seen by a handful of people. No complementary material accompanied these images, so I had to rely on what was revealed in them, and they revealed just how useful photography can be as their own source of inquiry. Of course, we also tell narratives through imagery. Images evoke emotions within us: nostalgia, pride, joy, defeat, loss. Hopefully the Leafs won't experience that. And we use those images to convey the story we're trying to tell. When it comes to sport, the iconic moments are remembered through their visual representations, and as they are commemorated through their visual reproductions, they conjure emotions and memories in us. And even photographs, which capture a mere split second of the moment, can tell the narrative of the event it was taken from. Photographs are the eyes into the events of the past. The problem with this, of course, is that while written texts have grammar, lexicon, and linguistic systems, there is no equivalent for photographs or visual media. We have to decode and analyze them and endow meaning onto them. In essence, as critical as visual sources are, we have to speak for them, instead of letting them speak for themselves, as is the case with most written and oral sources. Therefore, photographs are in a unique position in which they work well with oral history, and the increase of visual sources in oral history has been called the visual turn. Photographs intersect with oral history at several important points, including experience, memory, and storytelling. When working together, they're able to reveal and fill in the gaps and silences in each other. They reveal a more complete account of what happened. Oral history captures stories, memories, and experiences that otherwise would have been forgotten, and preserve it in the entirety the way the interviewee recounted it. It presents a way for female players to tell their stories the way they want to in their own voice, a platform which has not often been provided to them. While photographs capture the moment as the eyewitnesses saw it, and often reveal split-second moments that were missed in memories or written or oral testimonies. In sum, both the oral and the visual are key aspects of human experience. And with the limit of written sources and scholarship on and about women's hockey, to exclude either would be to neglect a critical source to understand the history and experience of women's hockey. With this in mind, I turned to my research on women's hockey at the Canada Games. The Canada Games are a multi-sport event representing the highest level of competition for Canadian athletes. Women's hockey was included at the Canada Games at the 1991 Canada Games in Charlottetown, less than 1 year after the first Women's World Hockey Championship was held in Ottawa in March of 1990. Centered around the role of the Canada Games and the creation of high-performance women's hockey, ice hockey, I sought to answer the question, why is women's hockey at the Canada Games significant? This question was approached through the following sub-questions. What was the state of women's hockey before 1991 when it was included at the Canada Games? How has the inclusion of women's hockey at the Canada Games benefited high-performance women's hockey nationally? How have the Canada Games provided a podium pathway to international events for female hockey players? And have the Canada Games created role models? If yes, how have they impacted the next generation of female hockey players? There's Dr. Stevens. So, methodology. The Canada Games photograph collection containing over 66,000 photographs arrived at Brock on October 20th, 2021. I digitally preserved 302 photographs from the 1991 and 1995 Canada Winter Games, all of the photographs on women's hockey in the collection. So what did I find in these photographs? While women were absent from national and international competitions until 1990, the 1990s saw rapid expansion in women's hockey, beginning with the first Women's World Hockey Championship in 1990 and ending with the addition of women's hockey to the Olympics in 1998. Between this, women's hockey was first included in the Canada Games at the 1991 Winter Games in Charlottetown, and the Canada Games are inherently linked to the international success of women's hockey. The inclusion of women's hockey at the Canada Games created grassroots programs, kept girls in the sport, gave them role models, and increased visibility of the game, becoming critical to high-performance women's hockey in Canada and making Canadian women a dominant force in the sport. High-performance sport is defined as a sport system that supports athletes that stepped onto the podium pathway or equivalent. It includes resources and support personnel in place that support and culminate in performance at the Olympic, Paralympic Games, and/or senior sport world championships. Prior to the 1990s, there were no opportunities for high-performance women's hockey. The first Women's World Hockey Championship was not held until March of 1990. After the success of the tournament, the decision to include women's hockey at the Olympics was made in 1992. It was only in 1998 that women's hockey made its inaugural appearance at the Olympics in Japan. It was not until 2008 that the International Ice Hockey Federation sanctioned a Women's World Under-18 Championship. In 1991, women's hockey made its first appearance at the Canada Games in Charlottetown, providing a high-performance opportunity to girls under 17. Today, the Winter Games are a step of Hockey Canada's program of excellence, which was originally created in 1982 with the focus of the Men's World Under-20 Championships, the World Juniors. It was created to sponsor success at the junior level, to prepare players to represent Canada at the senior level, with the goal of maintaining Canada at the forefront of international hockey success. The inclusion of women in the program of excellence began in 1990 with an open tryout for the first Women's World Hockey Championship, but the program only ran in years that featured a world championship: 1990, 1992, 1994, 1997. In 1998, however, when women's hockey was included, the Olympic Games and the Women's World Hockey Championship were held annually. The program of excellence became a full-time program. The Under-22 Women's National Development Team was created. At the inclusion of women's hockey in 1991, the Canada Games were not incorporated into the program of excellence. Nonetheless, they still served as a pipeline for Canada's best, with countless future Olympians and Hall of Famers passing through the Winter Games. According to Dr. Julie Stevens, the assistant coach of Team Alberta in 1999, who has written extensively on women's hockey, as we are aware, the Canada Games was basically feeders into our national women's development team, which at the time was an under-22 team and our national senior women's team. In 2001, Hockey Canada implemented the Under-18 tournament, adding another step in development of high-performance hockey in young girls. Today, the Canada Games replaces the Under-18 tournament every 4 years. Truly significant about the addition of the Canada Games to the program of excellence is that the Under-18 tournament is played between 8 regional and provincial teams, including 2 teams from Ontario and 1 team of the Atlantic provinces. While this promotes high-performance hockey, it is also exclusive. The Canada Games, however, provides opportunities for amateur female players across the country to participate in high-performance sport. In the words of Dr. Stevens, it's a very integrated event in terms of advancing female hockey in Canada as a whole. It's mandatory that every province and territory participate and send teams. So right off the get-go, it meant that at least all 10 provinces had to run a women's hockey program, high-performance program of some kind, so that every 4 years they had a team to send to the Canada Games. That commitment alone was massive to the advancement of grassroots girls hockey, Dr. Stevens said. Women's hockey advanced rapidly through the 1990s because of the growth of many new high-performance opportunities in sport. In March of 1990, when the first Women's World Hockey Championship were held, there were less than 5,000 registered female players in Canada. A recent survey by the International Ice Hockey Federation now lists nearly 102,000. In 1991, Nova Scotia finished in 8 out of the 10 competing provinces. The hockey program still in its youth, they played the tournament in blank white jerseys. But in one game cycle, the second smallest province by area, 4th by population, had team jerseys with color coordinated equipment, demonstrating considerable growth in both the outlook and support of women's hockey. Women made history when they stepped onto Olympic ice in Japan in 1998. 4 of the 20 women to play on the first National Olympic team, Cassie Campbell-Pasco, Ontario, Nancy Jolie, Quebec, Sammy Jo Small, Manitoba, and Haley Wickenheiser, Alberta, also made history in Charlottetown when they participated in the inaugural Canada Games. Captaining Team Ontario at the 1995 Winter Games, Gina Heffert also represented Canada at the Olympics. Campbell Pascal, the first captain of Team Ontario and three-time Olympian, captained Team Canada to their first two Olympic gold medals in 2002 and 2006, and is the only Canadian hockey player, man or woman, to captain Team Canada to two Olympic gold medals. Heffert, the second captain of Team Ontario and a five-time Olympian, was the sixth female inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Wickenheiser, representing Team Alberta at just 12 years of age in 1991 and a five-time Olympian, is Canada's all-time leading scorer in women's hockey and often seen as the greatest female to ever play for Canada. Heffert and Wickenheiser are two of only three women's ice hockey players who have won 4 Olympic gold medals. In an interview with Calgary Hockey Magazine in 2017, Campbell Pascal reflected on her experiences at the Canada Games. It was a really nice experience, and it gave me perspective on what it'd be like to be an elite athlete. It came at a time in my life when a lot of girls quit because they didn't see a future in it. That event kind of kept me in the game. In 2019, Gina Kingsbury, two-time Olympic gold medalist who represented Team Quebec in 1995 and 1999, also reflected on her experiences at the Canada Games. To me, the Canada Games, I put them right there with my Olympic Games. It's even more impactful when you're 13 or 15. It leaves a huge mark on you. Prior to 1991, programs for high-performance women's hockey did not exist. Girls who wanted to play competitively had to play on boys' teams, but there was considerable lack of support from the minor hockey communities. Without the inclusion of women's hockey at the Canada Games, athletes like Campbell Pascal could have been lost to the sheer lack of programs available. Consequently, not only was the 1991 Canada Games important to the development of high-performance women's hockey in Canada, but it was critical to keeping young girls in the sport, a sport that has come to symbolize what it means to be Canadian. The first girls to play in the Canada Games in 1991 and 1995, the same women who represented Canada and Japan in 1998, did not grow up with the opportunities to have female players as their idols. With no high-performance hockey programs for women, in their youth, these women imagined to choose either Mark Messier or Wayne Gretzky, as the commentary said at the 2010 Olympics. This was changed by the turn of the millennium. Megan Augusta, for example, represented Team Ontario in 2003 and began her Olympic career in 2006 alongside her idol, Campbell Pascal. As Carla McLeod explained in 2020, girls nowadays, they follow Blair Turnbull and Poulin on their Instagram and kind of get a feel for them. That's different. McLeod played for Team Alberta in 1995 and 1999 and was their coach in 2019. She was inducted into the Canada Games Hall of Honor in 2017 and is also a two-time Olympic gold medalist. For McLeod, representation matters and it's key to growing the game. Today, young girls in hockey can look up to athletes they see themselves in, like Wickenheiser, Campbell Pascal, Augusta, McLeod, Poulin, Turnbull, Spooner, Billiard. It starts with us girls. We're the ones trying to inspire the up-and-coming girls, and we want to leave a legacy by making women's hockey the best of the best, and knowing it was us girls that got women's hockey where it's at today, Augusta said in an interview with the Hamilton Bulldogs. When coaching Team Alberta in 2019, it was important for McLeod that her players understood the legacy of those who came before them. The coaching staff paired each player in 2019 with a previous Team Alberta player and had them complete a project on that player to understand their historical impact. In essence, passing the torch from one generation to the next to safeguard the legacy so many have built. The Canada Games not only kept some of these elite athletes in the sport, but continually provides a high-performance pathway for those who idolize them. The success of these women turned them into role models to inspire the next generation of female hockey players, encouraging grassroots programs for girls hockey, will also demonstrate that elite success was highly possible. Since the 2006 Olympic Games in Turin, when equal television coverage was given to men's and women's hockey games, there's been a considerable growth in public support and subsequent media interest of women's teams. In 1991 and 1995, when high-performance women's hockey was still getting off the ground, the arena women played in were nearly empty. Not that many people there. 24 years later, the arena for the women's gold medal game at the 2019 Canada Games in Red Deer was more than full. McLeod recounted, the lineup to get into this venue, it snakes around the building. Everyone in Red Deer was trying to get into this game. They had to lock it down because it's over fire code. So now these young punks come out of the tunnel to this roaring crowd, like that's what they're going to remember. The medals are cool and the win is awesome, but they're going to remember that energy. Attendance for women's hockey has risen dramatically, while high-performance opportunities continue to grow for women's hockey. In the Canada Games, we're at the front, helping lead the way for women's hockey. Women have been critical to Canadian sport achievement. In hockey, the women's national team has continually outperformed the men's national team, winning 5 gold medals and 2 silver medals in comparison to the men's 3 gold and a bronze. The Canada Games are inherently linked to the international success of women's hockey and have been critical to the development of high-performance women's hockey in Canada. Multiple Olympians and Hockey Hall of Famers have passed through the Canada Games. 15 of the 21 women to win a gold medal at the 2014 Sochi Games and 12 of the 23 women to win gold this year in Beijing had played in the Canada Games, including Captain Clutch herself, Marie-Philippe Poulin. Now the question remains, who will be next? The Canada Games are returning to Prince Edward Island in 2023, the place where it all began for women's hockey. In 1991, Hayley Wickenheiser scored the first golden goal in tournament history to begin a record-setting career with the women's national team. Will the next Wickenheiser get her chance to shine at the 2023 Canada Games? That remains to be seen. And for anyone interested, an online exhibit of this presentation featuring all these images will soon be available at the Sport Oral History website, sportoralhistory.ca, where you can also find the oral history interviews that I used for this project, as well as all the others for the Canada Games. And there's also an upcoming collection featuring oral history of the Garden City Arena, which will be coming out this June. Thank you.
I've got a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering, from an administrative perspective, does the Canada Games have like an administrative archive that can become a starting point to try and match up names and teams to the photos that you've been putting together?
That's what we're trying to do
Okay.
right now. Basically, there's not much but these pictures. We're trying to digitize them. We're up to just over 1,000 images across probably 10 different sports right now, and we're working on identifying those inside the images.
Do you have any database about participants in the Canada Games moving on to the US colleges and playing US college women's hockey?
The Canada Games has an alumni database that lists a lot of things that might be on there.
And then maybe one
Can I
last.
ask one question?
Okay, we got a
That's all right.
question, yeah.
That you're thinking of going on to graduate school. What would you like to examine or explore next? With this creative work and the integration of, exhibits as well as kind of oral history research.
It's a really good question. Not quite sure, really, to be honest. I'm still thinking about that.
Did you stay with hockey or something
yeah.
different?
Definitely.
The only thing I was going to say, if there's no other questions, is that we'll put a little plug in for the Canada Summer Games, which are in Niagara in August. So if they're coming this way, or there's going to be events in Welland and St. Catharines and all around the region. So welcome.
It's my job on behalf of the organization to say a special thank you, Kat. So step up there and take a picture. Got a little something. Sorry, Kevin's not here to autograph this, but the book, another book by one of our members, Kevin Shea's, the Toronto Maple Leaf Hockey Club Centennial Edition. So thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure to hear your work, and there's a journal and a few things there. So I think Benoit wants to take a picture. So hang on back with me.
Thank you.
Thank you for searching. Much appreciated.
All right. Oh, you want to stop?
Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you.
You can start it again?
Oh, of course.
And say stop.